ओम परतत्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्ण समाज्ञया यो धर्म स्थापन रतो वीरेशं तं नमाम्यहम्. We are studying Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga and we have finished reading 4 chapters therefrom, and now today we are taking up a new chapter, and the name of the chapter is We Help Ourselves, Not the World. But in the beginning, Swamiji is not dealing with this subject. This subject Swamiji is dealing after some time, after some paragraphs. Though the heading of the chapter is this, we'll think of this when we come to that topic. In the beginning, Swamiji is telling some other things, and that thing is what we call ritualism. Rituals, symbols, all these are a necessary part of Karma Yoga. Swamiji has laid down, Thakur has laid down Shiva Jnana Jiv Seva, but that is not what everybody practices. That is not what everybody has to practice. People worship God through various rituals and symbols. That also is a Karma Yoga, because they are doing karma by their hands, and by that they are trying to feel God consciousness. So this also becomes a part of Karma Yoga. And Swamiji wants to deal with every aspect of Karma Yoga. So it is not necessary that only work or work without attachment or these things. So let me read now and begin this 5th chapter called We Help Ourselves and Not the World. Before considering further how devotion to duty helps us in our spiritual progress, so that duty part he continues after some time. Let me place before you in a brief compass another aspect of what we in India mean by karma. What we in India mean by karma is the anushtan, is the practice, is the rituals which everybody almost follows or used to follow up till now. Many of us up till now even follow. We do pujas in our house, and so that also is a karma. In every religion there are 3 parts. In every religion, mind you, there are 3 parts. Philosophy, mythology and ritual. Philosophy, of course, is the essence of every religion. That means the basic concepts on which that religion is developed is called philosophy here by Swamiji. So, philosophy, of course, is the essence of every religion. Sometimes we forget this, but it is absolutely important that the concepts around which our religion is revolving must be understood. Mythology explains and illustrates it by means of more or less legendary lives of great men, stories and fables of wonderful things and so on. What is mythology? What we call Puranas. Very important thing Swamiji is telling us, how to study the Puranas, how to take benefit from the spiritual benefit from the Puranas. Mythology explains and illustrates it. Explains, that means in philosophical portion you will find the different subtler aspects of truth are told in a subtler way. Those who have got the receptivity of feeling the subtle things, they can only understand. Everybody does not understand philosophy. And that is why Puranas were born. Puranas means old. And the Puranas were in existence right from the Vedic days. Though, let me add here, though the Puranas which we read are much after Christ, but the Puranas itself was present even in the old days. I will give an example from the Chandogya Upanishad. Narada approached his guru Sanat Kumar, and Narada was known to be a veteran scholar. And he approached Sanat Kumar saying, "Revered sir, please teach me." Sanat Kumar asked him that you know so many things. You please first tell me what you know. And when anything is small, less short, I will tell you. So Narada started narrating what he knew. I am not describing all those things here. But he said, I know the four Vedas. I know does not say, let me correct the language. He said, I study four Vedas. And I study Itihas and Puran, which is the fifth Veda. That is what Narada said. Itihas means history. What is the meaning of Itihas? It happened like this. Itiha asa. It happened like this. So facts are there described. History. What is history? His story. The old kings and their story. Actual happenings. And Puranas are separated from history. That means they are not history. This one must understand. Otherwise they would not have been separated. In India, two books only were accepted as history. One was Valmiki Ramayana and one was Mahabharata. Mahabharata in the original. Mahabharata, what we read, may be the 4th or 5th edition, and everybody has expanded it. And so there are what we call interpolations in Mahabharata. The original story is a history. That a war took place, that Krishna was there, and that is a history. Valmiki Ramayana I mentioned, not any Ramayana please. Valmiki Ramayana is a history, how Rama lived. These two books are accepted as history. And Puranas there is no limit. 18 Mahapuranas, 18 Upapuranas and so many other Puranas. So what are these Puranas? Swamiji is explaining here. They explain and illustrate. Explain means in the language in which we can receive, in the language in which ordinary man can receive, what we call the grosser aspect of language, in that they are explained and illustrated. That means through examples we are able to understand many things which we are not able to understand in theory. Or theory we really understand only when we see examples. So in the Puranas many examples are given. By means of the more or less legendary life. More or less legendary means, what is legend? Legend is not history. These days the word legend is used for anything. In cricket we see he has become a living legend. Legend means, if we have to translate in Indian language, we call it Danta Katha. Stories told from mouth to mouth is called legend. When a man becomes famous, celebrity, we tell about him and that how people come to know. So, legend means story spread from mouth to mouth. Whether real or unreal, we do not go to examine it. In this respect, I can quote you some wonderful thing. Mahapurush Maharaj had a disciple, Dhana Gopal Mukherjee, and he had settled in America. He has written a wonderful book, The Face of Silence, about Sri Ramakrishna. Reading this book, only Romarola came to know about Sri Ramakrishna. So, in the preface to this book, he says, I am not concerned with the objective facts of Sri Ramakrishna's life. I am telling you the legends. Because legends tell us how Sri Ramakrishna impacted or influenced other people, how other people took him. That is told by legends. And so, I have collected the legends and I am telling you. Those who have not read, please read that book, The Face of Silence. So, legends means we are not going to critically analyze the history, but this is how he appeared to people. That is called legends. More or less legend. That means some history, some legends. legendary lives of great men. Stories are mere stories. And fables. Fable, what is fable? A story in which animals also are included, it's called fable. In Gospel we read Sri Ramakrishna, one brahmachari was going, one snake was there, and they talked and all that is called fable. So, fable means those stories in which animals also become included. That becomes fable. Through stories, through fables, through great lives, fables of wonderful things. So, something which do not appeal to our reason, that is called a wonderful thing. Wonderful things and so on, so many things. So when we read Puranas, Swamiji has told us, don't critically analyze the history or geography in the Puranas. But let you read Puranas and it creates an impression on your mind by which you understand the Vedanta. That is the value. So Swamiji says every religion has this part essential. And then ritual. Ritual gives to that philosophy a still more concrete form so that everyone may grasp it. Ritual is in fact concretized philosophy. Concretized means you are worshipping. You are holding a conch shell, you are holding the bell, you are holding the lamp, and you are handling things by your hand. And thinking, that represents philosophy. Think that these are pancha tanmatras, think that we are doing like this, think like. So, the philosophy is concretized, made gross in the form of rituals. And this is a part of karma yoga, mind you. This ritual is karma because we are doing it. Actually, the sense of doership is very much there and we are doing it. In Bengali we say hate nate kora hocche. It is necessary in every religion, necessary. Because most of us cannot understand abstract spiritual things until we grow much spiritually. When we grow spiritually, when our consciousness rises higher, then we can appreciate the spiritual things directly. Till then, through handling and through stories, we understand that. It is easy for men to think that they can understand anything. Another point, so-called intellectuals think they can understand anything, but they do not really grasp the meaning, the concept behind that. But when it comes to practical experience, so understanding should resolve into experience, not only buddhic understanding. They find that abstract ideas are often very hard to comprehend. Therefore, symbols are of great help. That is the need. And we cannot dispense with the symbolical method of putting things before us. We cannot dispense it. Just remove this, don't do like this, don't do like this. Will be buddhi veda. For the man, let it happen. When he grows, then I will say, from time immemorial, symbols have been used by all kinds of religions. Swamiji, by a comparative study of all religions, has proved his point that symbols are necessary everywhere, every time. So from time immemorial, he says, symbols have been used by all kinds of religions. Not only all religions, but all kinds of religions. In one sense, we cannot think, but in symbols. Words themselves are symbols of thought. Thought is an idea, but as soon as we try thinking, word comes. So word becomes the symbol of that thought. In another sense, everything in the universe may be looked upon as a symbol. Symbol of God, everything. The whole universe is a symbol and God is the essence behind. This kind of symbology is not simply the creation of man, that is another thing. Symbols are not created, they naturally come to the mind of man. It is not that certain people belonging to a religion sit down together and think out certain symbols and bring them into existence out of their own minds. This is not true. The symbols of religion have a natural growth. Otherwise, why is it that certain symbols are associated with certain ideas in the mind of almost everyone? Almost everyone. Swamiji is showing some universal symbols. Certain symbols are universally prevalent. Many of you may think that the cross first came into existence as a symbol in connection with the Christian religion. That is what normally people think. But as a matter of fact, it existed before Christianity was, before Moses was born. You know, Bible has two parts, the Old Testament and the New Testament. So Moses is the ideal man in the Old Testament, and before him also symbol was there. Which symbol? Cross. Before the Vedas were given out, before there was any human record of human thing, that means known history, before any known history, the symbol existed. So about cross. The cross may be found to have been in existence among the Aztecs and the Phoenicians, ancient races, much older races, and there this cross existed. Every race seems to have had the cross. Now, that is only a cross. But we are interested in the crucified Savior, what Christ is shown. And we think it has come only by Christianity. Again, the symbol of the crucified Savior, of a man crucified upon a cross, appears to have been known to almost every nation. Swamiji's historical research into religion has helped him to understand and to explain to us that do not associate a thing with a particular religion born at a particular time. It is a natural growth in human mind. So now we have talked about two symbols, cross and a Savior on the cross. The circle has been a great symbol throughout the world. Shaligram Shila or the circle itself, some people read it as zero, but this is the symbol of the all-sidedness of God, of the samatva of God, and it existed everywhere. Then there is the most universal of all symbols. Most universal, compared to all these, still universal, the swastika. Swastika picture is there, you see in your Karma Yoga. At one time it was thought that the Buddhists carried it all over the world with them. But it has been found out that ages before Buddhism, it was used among nations. In old Babylon and in Egypt, it was to be found. What does this show? All these symbols could not have been purely conventional. That means we have decided and we use this. There must be some reason for them, some natural association between them and the human mind. Example another. Language is not the result of convention. It is not that people ever agreed to represent certain ideas by certain words. There never was an idea without a corresponding word, or a word without a corresponding idea. Ideas and words are in their nature inseparable. Kalidasa has said this, Vagartha Vivasamprukto. The symbols to represent ideas may be sound symbols or color symbols. Color symbols mean writing. Sound symbols mean, even in those days writing was not there. Om was famous. Om is a sound symbol used in the Mandukya Upanishad. In Christianity, in the book of John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Nothing was created which was not created from the Word. So, this word or sound symbol is very old. Deaf and dumb people have to think with other than sound symbols. Every thought in the mind has a form as its counterpart, Nam Roop. This is called in Sanskrit philosophy Nama Rupa, name and form. It is as impossible to create by convention a system of symbols as it is to create a language. Now, a few days back was the Christmas Eve. I got a book in my hand, original Old Testament, New Testament, given in Armenian language and Hebrew language and Unani language, and he made a comparative study of Unani and Sanskrit, and he found almost similar there. May not say that from Sanskrit Unani has come. Some people claim like that. We cannot say that from Unani Sanskrit has come. It is a natural growth in human mind. That is, Swamiji has given an example of the language. Now he comes back to religion. In the world's ritualistic symbols, we have an expression of the religious thought of humanity. It is easy to say that there is no use of rituals and temples and all such paraphernalia. Every baby says that in modern time. What is a baby? One who does not possess discrimination is called baby. Baby is not a small child always. When Swamiji came back from America and giving a big lecture in Chennai, and big suited, booted people in the audience, and Swamiji says, "You mustache babies." So this Bala in Sanskrit or baby represents Aviveki, man without discrimination. He might have grown physically but not spiritually. But it must be easy for all to see that those who worship inside a temple are in many respects different from those who will not worship them. Temple's symbol is there, image is a symbol, photo is a symbol, sometimes some yantra, some figure is kept as a symbol, and we criticize. I have heard many people telling, even in the modern time, when God is inside, what is the use of outside? As if God is inside means limited, God is not outside. That is the funny statement. One gentleman asked me, a gentleman who should have known much better, asked me that when we know that God is Nirakar Nirgun, why we get stuck up in Sakar Sagun? And those people worship Bharat Mata as is that not a Sakar Sagun? Is that not a symbol? So, man should not get stuck up in the symbols, you understand. But when he rings the bell, he worships, he feels something, and that feeling will lead him gradually to feel the nearness with God. He is doing something for God. This feeling is important. And that is why this is Karma Yoga. So those who go to temples have some feeling for God. Those who do not go to temples, I remember here one of my friends saying, Swamiji has declared on the beach of California, we need not go to temples, we need not. That Swamiji is emphasizing God is within you. But he never says that you should not go to temples. So, therefore, the association of particular temples, rituals, and other concrete forms with particular religions has a tendency to bring into the mind of the followers of those religions the thoughts for which these concrete things stand as symbols. And it is not wise to ignore rituals and symbology altogether. The study and practice of these things form naturally a part of Karma Yoga. Those who do not require it may not do it. But then mental symbols come. So, now one more point he is discussing. This is symbols. Then language, words, sound symbols. There are many other aspects of the science of work. Work is a science, he has already told us. And there are, one aspect he has dealt with is symbology, rituals. The another aspect is, one among them is to know. Many other aspects of the science of work. One among them is to know the relation between thought and word, and what can be achieved by the power of the word. So previously he discussed language, that was only as an example of symbology, but now separately he is telling us the power of the word. We take our Ishta mantra, we repeat it. In every religion the repeating of certain texts are there. So these are word symbols. And it has a power. In every religion the power of the word is recognized. So much so that in some of them creation itself is said to have come out of the word. Just now I quoted Book of John. Nothing was created which was not created through the word. And in India people think about Vedas like that. Vedas said cow, so cow came out. Every Srishti came out because of the sound created there. The external aspect of the thought of God is the word. And as God thought and willed before He created, creation came out of the word. In this stress and hurry of our materialistic life, another important point he is telling now, the more we bring in machines, the more we lose the sensitivity of the subtler mind. This is an absolute truth. In the stress and hurry of our materialistic life, our nerves lose sensibility and become hardened. The older we grow, the longer we are knocked about in the world, the more callous we become. And we are apt to neglect things that even happen persistently and prominently around us. He is giving certain examples. Human nature, however, asserts itself sometimes, and we are led to inquire into and wonder at some of these common occurrences. Wondering thus is the first step in the acquisition of life. Wondering means questioning. How this has come? How that has come? How this is possible? That is, Swamiji says, human nature, however, asserts. Apart from the higher philosophic and religious value of the word, now, for example, he is telling from the secular point of view. We may see that sound symbols play a prominent part in the drama of human life. I am talking to you. I am not touching you. The pulsations of the air caused by me, by my speaking, go into your ear. They touch your nerves and produce effects in your minds. Is it not sound symbol? You cannot resist this. What can be more wonderful than this? One man calls another a fool, and at this the other stands up and clenches his fist and lands a blow on his nose. So simply one word, fool, it has produced this effect. Look at the power of the word. There is a woman weeping and miserable. Another woman comes along and speaks to her a few gentle words. The doubled up frame of the weeping woman becomes straightened at once. Her sorrow is gone and she already begins to smile just by a kind word. Think of the power of words. They are a great force in higher philosophy as well as in common life. Day and night we manipulate this force without thought and without inquiry. All this is Karma Yoga, mind you. To know the nature of this force and to use it well is also a part of Karma Yoga. So Karma Yoga is not simply doing karma. To know the value of symbols, to use them, to know the value of effect produced by the words and to use them. So this is the one or two topics taken before we come to the topic by which the chapter is named, and that name is we help ourselves, not the world. And this is a very important factor, that by doing unselfish work, we are gaining. The man to whom we help is not the man who gains spiritually. He may gain materially and we are gaining spiritually. And because we are interested in our spiritual growth through Karma Yoga, Swamiji wants us to know. Otherwise we become arrogant. You know, Sri Ramakrishna was talking about Vaishnavism. He used to talk about every religion. And he says Vaishnavas believe in three things. Name Ruchi, there should be taste in the name of God. Vaishnava Puja, those who are higher than us, to worship or revere them. And Jive Daya. The Vaishnavas have a habit of those non-Vaishnavas, they call it Jivas. And about Jivas we should have compassion. He told these three things. But when he started to explain them, he explained this Nam and Nami Aved. So, name is same as the person named, so we must have taste in taking the name of God. Then, because they are higher than us, if we revere them, we also gain. But when he tried to explain the third, his mind recoiled. He entered into Samadhi. And from there he brought down a truth and told, no, not compassion, but service to the Jivas with the knowledge that they are Shivas. So, what we are doing? Service to man with the knowledge that they are Shivas. Unless we do this, we in the mission have diluted this a little, you know. We say Shiv Bhave Jiv Seva. Thakur's word was Shiva Jnane Jiv Seva. But today we have that bhav, tomorrow it will become knowledge. Unless this we possess, work will not help us. Now, when we are worshipping like this, we are gaining. So now Swamiji comes to that topic. If we know this, we will not be arrogant, we will not be condescendingly doing something. We will know that we are benefited spiritually, then we will have sufficient respect for the person whom we are helping. Our duty, so Swamiji comes to that topic now. After discussing the topic of rituals and mantra shakti, he now comes to that. Our duty to, mind you, these two are important points of Karma Yoga. Our duty to others means helping others. That duty thing he continues here. Previous chapter was duty, and that duty he continues here. Our duty to others means helping others, doing good to the world in general. Why should we do good to the world? Apparently to help the world, but really to help ourselves. I remember here some incident. When I was in Chandigarh, one NRI came from England. And we were talking of our mobile health and all that services. He said, have you made plans to solve the medical problems of the entire country? I said, no. We don't think we will solve the entire problems of the medical problems of the country. We do what we can, and that raises us. That is our idea. Not that whole country we are going to do something. We can do what we can because that helps us. That is our thought. So apparently to help the world, but really to help ourselves. We should always try to help the world. That should be the highest motive in us. Motive is as discussed in the first chapter. The highest motive is helping others. But if we consider well, we find that the world does not require our help at all. Another important point. If I do not do, who will do? World will find out who will do. So the great truth also is that nobody depends upon you and me. How many people have been born, how many people have gone away, the world goes on in its own way. So we should remove. What is this? Not compassionate this? Swamiji is removing the idea of egoism in our work. Then only work will help us. That the world does not require our help at all. This world was not made that you or I should come and help it. I once read a sermon in which it was said, all this beautiful world is very good because it gives us time and opportunity to help others. Apparently this is a very beautiful sentiment, apparently. But it is not. But is it not a blasphemy? Blasphemy means criticizing God. That is called blasphemy. To say that the world needs our help, if God has created, we cannot deny that there is much misery in it. To go out and help others is therefore the best thing we can do. Although in the long run we shall find that helping others is only helping ourselves. Our mind expands, our mind becomes more loving, our mind becomes more receptive to the spiritual ideas. That is the entire value of Karma Yoga. As a boy, I had some white mice. They were kept in a little box in which there were little wheels. And when the mice tried to cross the wheels turned and the mice never got anywhere. So it is with the world and our helping it. The only help is that we get moral exercise. This world is neither good nor evil. Each man manufactures a world for himself. If a blind man begins to think of the world, it is either as soft or hard, or as cold or hot, because he cannot see. We are a mass of happiness or misery. We have seen that hundreds of times in our lives. As a rule, the young are optimistic and the old pessimistic. The young have the life before them, the old complain that their day is gone. Hundreds of desires which they cannot fulfill struggle in their hearts. Both are foolish nevertheless. Why? Life is good or evil according to the state of mind in which we look at it. It is neither by itself. We think world is good, and world is a shadow of the good. World is the shadow of God. And so when you try to catch a shadow, what happens? Hi, alas. That is called misery. So it is neither by itself. Example he gives, fire by itself is neither good nor evil. When it keeps us warm, we say how beautiful is fire. When it burns our fingers, we blame it. Still, in itself it is neither good nor bad. According to as we use it, it produces in us the feeling of good or bad. So also is the world. It is perfect. Perfection means, by perfection is meant that it is perfectly fitted to meet its ends. We may all be perfectly sure that it will go on beautifully well without us, and we need not bother our heads wishing to help it. Then why should we help? Because we are a help. That is how the whole thing is turned by Swamiji totally. The whole thing in Karma Yoga is the change of attitude, the change of outlook, which will help us to change the level of our consciousness. Yet we must do good. The desire to do good is the highest motive power we have. In the first chapter itself he has declared, work for work's sake also he has not taken highest, but doing good he has taken as the highest motive, because that raises our level of consciousness. The desire to do good is the highest motive power we have. If we know all the time that it is a privilege to help others, then the doing good to others is a motive power. Doing good to others out of compassion is not the highest motive power. But doing good to others with the knowledge that it is helping us, then that is the highest motive. It is a privilege to help others. Do not stand on a high pedestal and take 5 cents in your hand and say, "Here my poor man." But be grateful that the poor man is there, so that by making a gift to him, you are able to help yourself. In this there is a beautiful story, beautiful anecdote about Swamiji himself. You must have heard the name John D. Rockefeller. And Rockefeller created a Rockefeller Trust, and which is helping hundreds of Indians to go to higher education. But how it was started? Rockefeller then was a budding entrepreneur. That means he was growing. Some friend of his suggested, there is a saint has come from India, you go and visit him. He said, why should I go to this saint? And Swamiji was living near about where he was living. But one day, inside something happened because the friend had told him. And he was as if forced to go towards Swamiji. Instead of going to his office, his legs turned towards where Swamiji was staying. And he was arrogant. So in the Western countries, we do not enter anybody's room unless we ask permission, unless there is somebody who leads us in. But this man just pushed the door open and went inside. And Swamiji was reading or something, bending down his head on a desk. Swamiji did not look up at all, even though he entered forcibly. He stood before Swamiji. Swamiji never talked with him. Then Swamiji started talking as if to himself, meaning him. And he said, money, the use of money is in helping the needy. Money is not for your own use. This man thought, what is there? He is teaching me. He left without talking to Swamiji. But that idea, Swamiji's force, that idea started revolving in his mind. And then there was some charity. And he wrote a big check, big amount check for that charity. And before giving it to them, he came to Swamiji again. And Swamiji was in the same position. He put that check in front of Swamiji on that desk. And now he says, now you should thank me. Swamiji said, you should thank me. I gave you this idea that money is for helping others. You should thank me. And that changed Rockefeller. And from that day, he started helping others as much as he could. And he created the Rockefeller Foundation. Rockefeller Trust, I wrongly said, Rockefeller Foundation. He started after that. So this is how Swamiji said that money is for helping others. Do not stand on a high pedestal and take 5 cents in your hand and say, here my poor man. But be grateful that the poor man is there, so that by making a gift to him, you are able to help yourself. It is not the receiver that is blessed, but it is the giver. Be thankful that you are allowed to exercise your power of benevolence and mercy in the world, and thus become pure and perfect. So, Swamiji has told that karma leads to purity of the mind, and so helping others will purify your mind and perfect. Finally, you go to perfection. All good acts tend to make us pure and perfect. What can we do at best? Now, Swamiji is describing what is happening today even. In those days and in America, Swamiji is telling, what can we do at best? Build a hospital, make roads, or erect charity asylums. We may organize a charity and collect 2 or 3 millions of dollars. Build a hospital with 1 million. With the second, give balls and drink champagne. And of the third, let the officers steal half and leave the rest finally to reach the poor. That is what happens in all these things. What a perfect picture Swamiji is drawing. I have seen worse than this. Whether I take the name or not. In Tamil Nadu, I was walking on the roads near Kaveri. And on the trees, I found the announcement of some scheme. On many trees that notice was there. And there was no scheme, no work. Where the money went, we do not know. After 6 months, those notices were removed. That is over. So the poor did not get anything. That is the scheme. Swamiji here is at least telling 1/4 or 1/6 is going to the poor. I will tell you here. The government of India found that money going through Ramakrishna Mission reaches the poor. And so when any relief work is undertaken, they give money through Ramakrishna Mission. And now many corporate bodies are also giving. Here in Khetri, we are always distributing this thing or that thing with the help of some corporate body. We may organize a charity and collect 2 or 3 millions of dollars, build a hospital with 1 million, with the second give balls and drink champagne, and of the third let the officers steal half and leave the rest finally to reach the poor. But what are all these? Now second thought, But what are all these? One mighty wind in 5 minutes can break all your buildings up. What shall we do then? One volcanic eruption may sweep away all our roads and hospitals and cities and buildings. Let us give up all this foolish talk of doing good to the world. It is not waiting for your or my help, yet you must work and constantly do good. He is not asking us not to do work, not to be arrogant about it. Because it is a blessing to ourselves. That is the only way we can become perfect. That is the only way in which we can become perfect. When we try to help others, we grow. No beggar whom we have helped has ever owed a single cent to us. We owe everything to him because he has allowed us to exercise our charity on him. It is entirely wrong to think that we have done or can do good to the world, or to think that we have helped such and such people. All this duty extended Swamiji's teaching. Our duty to the others means helping others, so that we are helped. It is a foolish thought, and all foolish thoughts bring misery. Then the expectations come. We want power because we have helped somebody. We think that we have helped some man and expect him to thank us, and because he does not, unhappiness comes to us. I told you the example of Shakrananji. Why should we expect anything in return for what we do? Be grateful to the man you help. Think of him as God. That is the Indian idea. If you think of him as God, then you can do work without ego. And that is what Sri Ramakrishna taught us. Shiv Gyane Jiv Seva. Is it not a great privilege to be allowed to worship God by helping our fellow men? If we were really unattached, we should escape all this pain of vain expectation and could cheerfully do good work in the world. If attachment is there, expectations are there. If attachments are not there, expectations are not there, we are worshipping. Never will unhappiness or misery come through work done without attachment. The world will go on with its happiness and misery, not that misery will be obliterated, the work will go on. Eternity, misery through eternity. Now for this, Swamiji is telling a story to illustrate this point. There was a poor man who wanted some money, and somehow he had heard that if he could get hold of a ghost, he might command him to bring money or anything else he liked. So he was very anxious to get hold of a ghost. He went about searching for a man who would give him a ghost, and at last he found a sage with great powers and besought his help. The sage asked him what he would do with a ghost. I want a ghost to work for me. Teach me how to get hold of a ghost. To get hold of one, sir, I desire it very much, replied the man. But the sage said, don't disturb yourself, go home. The next day the man went again to the sage and began to weep and pray, give me a ghost, I must have a ghost, sir, to help me. At last the sage was disgusted and said, take this charm, some mantra. Repeat this magic word and a ghost will come, and whatever you say to him he will do. But beware, they are terrible beings and must be kept continually busy. If you fail to give him work, he will take your life. The man replied, that is easy. I can give him work for all his life. Desires. Then he went to a forest, and after a long repetition of the magic word, a huge ghost appeared before him and said, I am a ghost. I have been conquered by your magic, but you must keep me constantly employed. The moment you fail to give me work, I will kill you. The man said, build me a palace. And the ghost said, it is done. The palace is built. That is the power of the ghost. Bring me money, said the man. Here is your money, said the ghost. Cut this forest down and build a city in its place. That is done, said the ghost. Anything more? Now the man began to be frightened and thought, I can give him nothing more to do. He does everything in a trice. The ghost said, give me something to do or I will eat you. The poor man could find no further occupation for him and was frightened. So he ran and at last reached the sage and said, oh sir, protect my life. The sage asked him what the matter was, and the man replied, I have nothing to give the ghost to do. Everything I tell him to do, he does in a moment, and he threatens to eat me up if I do not give him work. Just then the ghost arrived saying, I will eat you. And he would have swallowed the man. The man began to shake and beg the sage to save his life. The sage said, I will find you a way out. Look at that dog with a curly tail. Draw your sword quickly and cut the tail off and give it to the ghost to straighten you out. The man cut off the dog's tail and gave it to the ghost, saying, straighten that out for me. The ghost took it and slowly and carefully straightened it out. But as soon as he let it go, it instantly curled up again. Once more he laboriously straightened it out, only to find it again curled up as soon as he attempted to let go of it. Again he patiently straightened it out, but as soon as he let it go, it curled up again. So he went on for days and days, story is there, until he was exhausted and said, I was never in such trouble before in my life. I am an old veteran ghost, but never before was I in such trouble. I will make a compromise with you, he said to the man. You let me off, and I will let you keep all I have given you, and will promise not to harm you. The man was much pleased and accepted the offer gladly. This is only a story. What Swamiji wants to tell us, this world is like a God's curly tail, and people have been striving to straighten it out for hundreds of years. But when they let it go, it has curled up again. How could it be otherwise? One must first know how to work without attachment, then one will not be a fanatic. So, this is a lesson we have learned, that we work to help ourselves. We cannot help the world in the real sense. And so, we stop here, though the para is continuing. We stop in between this para because another thought is coming here. So how could it be otherwise? Up till here we stop. First sentence of this para, then we'll come to that thought on the next Thursday. Om Paratatve Sada Lino Ramakrishna Samagya Yo Dharma Sthapana Rato Viresham Tam Namamyam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.